Hey, how you doing today? My name is Harry McGraw. Now, welcome to another episode of the McGraw Report. Now, today is our second episode. Once again, this is the McGraw Report. We're going to be talking about a lot of topics today. And we also have a guest coming in, but he's running a little bit late today, a very special guest. So let us show you about the topics that we're going to talk about today. Okay, so number one, mayor candidate Troy is going to be one of our guests today. And then we also have the Jason Van Dyke verdict. And we also have Kanye West visits the White House. Now, I'm going to speak a little bit briefly before our guest comes in today. So the Jason Van Dyke verdict, that was a big situation in Chicago where everyone stopped, everyone watched. It was something similar to the O.J. Simpson trial. And fortunately, justice has been served. Now, he has been charged on second-degree murder, and some people feel like it should have been a little bit more harsher. So if you think a little bit different about the verdict, please try to call in, and we'll take some questions or take some opinions live on the air. Also, just a little brief summary before my guests come in. Kanye West visits the White House. That was another controversial situation yesterday, all over the news. And one thing that Kanye was pressing about is more jobs in Chicago, moving his factory to Chicago. That's something brief that we talked about last week. Also, we have candidates that's coming in for Chicago later on today. And we have a little bit topics for today. So, before our guest comes in today, we're going to talk about the MAGA hat. Make America Great Again. And before we do that, we're actually going to just show you a little brief video of the verdict. How about that?
For the first time in nearly 50 years, a Chicago police officer has been found guilty of murder in an on-duty shooting. A jury today convicted Jason Van Dyke of murdering 17-year-old Laquan McDonald. The 2014 shooting, captured on a dashboard camera, ignited protests in the city and forced changes in the nation's second-largest police department. Dean Reynolds is in Chicago.
The 40-year-old police officer with 17 years of service in Chicago's toughest neighborhoods was stoic as the jury verdict was read aloud.
Will you please read the verdicts?
We, the jury, find the defendant, Jason Van Dyke, guilty of second-degree murder.
Conviction on a charge of second-degree murder plus 16 counts of aggravated battery for each of the 16 shots he fired into 17-year-old Laquan McDonald on that October night 4 years ago.
And now we could go home tonight and sleep knowing that Laquan is at peace.
Van Dyke shot McDonald 6 seconds after arriving on the scene, the only officer to shoot at the suspect who brandished a knife and refused to drop it. Having watched this dash cam video of the incident repeatedly and heard Van Dyke's pleas that he feared for his life, the jury declined to find him guilty of first-degree murder with a potential life sentence. This woman was the lone African-American on the panel, which deliberated for 7 hours.
We looked at all the evidence and we ruled on it accordingly.
Dan Herbert is Van Dyke's lawyer.
He was sacrificed by his leaders, by political leaders, by our supposed community leaders, and it was all for one reason.
Very controversial video footage we just showed of the Jason Van Dyke verdict. All over the web, all over the news. That was a clip from CNN. So today, we have our guest today. How you doing today, Troy?
How are you?
I cannot complain at all. Once again, we're going to have a really good show today. This is our second episode of Season 6 of the McGraw Report. So the topics that we're going to talk about today, Troy, is you're trying to run for mayor of Chicago. We also have the Jason Van Dyke verdict as well. And we also have Kanye West visit the White House.
I see that right there, right?
Absolutely.
I haven't been keeping up with Ye, but the other two I could certainly talk about, and we'll see about Ye.
Well, Definitely understanding that.
Right.
Well, since it's your first time coming to the show, please introduce yourself and tell them some of the work that you've been putting in throughout Chicago.
Sure. My name is Troy LaRaviere. I'm a candidate for mayor of Chicago. I am born and raised in the city, South Side, graduate of Dunbar High School, veteran of the United States Navy. I was an award-winning teacher, assistant principal, award-winning principal of the #1 neighborhood school in the city of Chicago, Blaine Elementary. And when I was at Blaine, I used that position to, when I was at Blaine, I saw a lot of corruption. I saw corruption in CPS, I saw corruption in City Hall, and I wasn't the only one who saw it. Principals across the district saw a lot of the ineptitude, the incompetence, and the corruption, but many people were afraid to speak out. But eventually I decided that I would use my position as a respected principal to call attention to the corruption and the racism in our school district, and that's what I did. For 5 years, I called out the corruption of Barbara Bird Bennett before the FBI investigated it. I called out this Aramark custodial scandal where they're sending hundreds of millions of our dollars, public school dollars, to this company that just happens to be a donor to the mayor's campaign fund. And so I risked my job repeatedly to basically expose the corruption of the school district and the mayor that appointed the school board.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood. I think we have a call on the line. Could you hit him in, please?
Yeah. Can you hear me? My name is James.
Hey, how you doing, James? Welcome to the McGraw Report. How may I help you at the moment?
Okay, when your guest was talking about the corruption, it's still going on. It's at the White House with President Donald Trump, and it's at the mayor at my office, and somebody need to do something.
Understood.
Agreed.
I definitely agree with you with that one.
It keep on happening, and I'm glad y'all coming out with all this, because there's too much happening.
Understood, brother. I really appreciate you, and thanks for your call. You want to chime in on that, Troy?
So yeah, it's certainly still happening. For instance, one of the things I saw was this, I mentioned the Aramark custodial contract, where they're giving hundreds of millions of our school dollars to a company that's left our schools filthy. And after they left our schools filthy, they renewed their contract, gave them hundreds of millions of more dollars. And oh, by the way, they just happened to be a major contributor to our mayor's campaign fund.
Wow.
The Barbara Bird Bennett soup scandal. We all know she's a former CEO of CPS.
Okay.
She is now in prison for a bribery scandal. But what many people do not know is that there was one principal before the FBI investigated, before the Inspector General investigated, risking his career to call that corruption out. The massive amount of loans that we're taking out or that we're borrowing from these banks that are going to have us paying billions in interest, right? And these banks just happen to also be, guess what, contributors to our mayor's campaign fund. The corruption in this city is open, it's blatant. The Chicago Tribune had a front page story in 2015, and they repeated the research in 2017 to see if anything had changed, and it had not changed. And that front page story said that 60 of the mayor's top 100 campaign contributors all got some kind of benefit, financial benefit from our tax dollars. Either a contract or an appointment to some board in which they could steer a contract their way. I mean, it's outright, it's blatant, and our school system suffers, our public investment suffers, job creation suffers, policing and community safety,
Absolutely.
Public safety, all suffer because we're not spending those resources on what we're supposed to be spending them for. We're spending them to make the wealthy wealthier.
Absolutely, Troy. I definitely agree with that as well. They don't call Chicago City the Windy City just because it's windy. It's really the politics. Now, we have several scandals that went on with governors, and Chicago is really big for corruption. That's what they say. So another thing that we would like to talk about today is immigration. How do you feel about immigration? Because Chicago is a big Hispanic city. We're kind of diverse throughout the city, but it's really big, and ICE is really in effect in Chicago. How do you feel about that, Troy?
So I want to take it back. So corruption is the #1 problem. The twin of corruption. Corruption is when you have a situation where most of our wealth in our society, Bernie Sanders will say this all the time, most of the wealth in our society is concentrated into the hands of a very few people, and those people then use that wealth to buy politicians, to corrupt our political system so that our government works for them and not for us. Now, racism comes into play because those same wealthy individuals, in order to rule all of us, there has to be a divide and conquer strategy. And racism is the largest, most effective divide and conquer tool you can possibly use. And they've been using it against us for 400 years in one form or another. And so black people, as African Americans, we're used to one form of that divide and conquer strategy in terms of you got the white working people and black working people. You can't have these two groups of people together, and so you create this idea of black inferiority, black criminality to divide working people against one another. But anti-immigration is another form of that divide and conquer strategy.
Absolutely.
And so you use this, this anti-black sentiment, this white supremacist sentiment to divide white and black working people. You create this anti-immigration sentiment to divide black working people from Hispanic working people. This idea that they're here to get our jobs.
Yeah.
That, you have this situation where the two of us, black and Hispanic communities, are not joining together because we've been taught and conditioned to see each other as the problem and not an economy where the problem is that the people who control the economy are artificially creating this lack of jobs. Like the system is set up to fail us, to pit us against one another. We don't have to have this Hunger Games kind of economy.
Okay.
Where it's them versus us or one versus another. We can come together and create an economy that works for us all. But if we did that, then they would not continue to be able to, and by they I mean the wealthy, get richer. Like people who have more money than they can spend in their entire lifetimes are getting wealthier and wealthier off the backs of people who don't have enough to last until the end of the month. And those people are black people. Those people are Hispanic people. Those people are working class white people. And so whether it's an anti-black sentiment, an anti-immigration sentiment, an this Islamophobia, this insane Islamophobia, all of it is used to divide working people against one another. And my administration is going to have an extremely strong focus on ending that kind of divide and conquer politics.
Well said. Now, Troy, speaking on experience, I have done construction for about 10 years now. I am the third generation of union members. My father is an electrician, works for Chicago. One thing that I want to ask you, are you pro-union?
Oh, absolutely. The fact that I made a decent wage as a teacher is the result. You talk about this strike stuff, I'll never forget when I was, I'm a Chicago resident. I went to Chicago public schools my whole life. I was at Mollison Elementary School on 44th and King Drive, right next to the Chicago Defender Building. And I remember the strikes of the 1980s, and I remember people having this mindset that, and using this language against the teachers like, you're denying children their education. No, they weren't. What they were doing was creating a situation where they made a wage that was decent enough to attract good people to the profession for us. And so that when I finally became of age, one of the reasons that I was able to make a decent living as a teacher is because of the sacrifices they made to go on strike and demand that teachers get a living wage.
Absolutely.
And so absolutely. I was just on the picket line with the Hyatt hotel strikers about a week ago. I was just talking to the orchestra musicians outside of the Civic Opera House, and I told them that anything they need from me, call me and I will be there. We have to support. I was just talking about this divide and conquer strategy in terms of turning black people against white people, against Latino people. One of the major forces against this divide and conquer strategy throughout the history of this country has been labor unions. Labor unions haven't been perfect. Sometimes labor unions have expressed some of the same racism that the 1% expresses.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But on a whole, labor unions have been, at their best, one of the main forces to bring black, white, Hispanic, working people of all backgrounds together to fight for that common standard of living for all of us. And so absolutely, to the extent that labor does that, I support labor.
I'm pro-labor as well, brother. Now, Troy, The Chicago mayor seat, it's a very, very hot seat. I think Mayor Rob Emanuel had a lot of pressure on him by, I think, every single angle, the trials. We even had a new police commissioner had to step in. There's a lot been going on with Rob Emanuel. Is there any pros or cons since he's on his way exiting that you believe he did well and some things that he could have done better on?
The one thing he did well was decide to leave. That's the one thing he did well. It was a hot seat because he made it one. When you have one corrupt scandal after another corrupt scandal, you make it a hot seat. And his job as mayor was more to manage or mismanage the one scandal after another created by his own policies, by his own actions, by the actions of the people he appointed to do what they did that got them in trouble in the first place. And so it's a hot seat because he was corrupt. You know, when I become mayor, I would imagine it would be less of a hot seat. The only thing that's going to make it hot when I'm in it is the pressure we get from the 1% that's going to be fighting tooth and nail against the agenda of my administration. The agenda to ensure that working people make a decent standard of living. The agenda to ensure that we desegregate this city, that we have a real commitment to desegregating Chicago and ending the racism and the corruption that has held us back for so long. So that's what's going to make the seat hot when I'm in it, that the 1% are going to be aiming for me and aiming for the movement that we're trying to build and shut that movement down.
Understood. Do we have that caller? Is he still available? All right, caller, what's your question? Welcome to the McGraw Report.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to see your show back on the air. I remember your dad, Harry McGraw, used to have this show back in the day. So welcome.
Thank you.
My comment was pointed to affirmative action. Those programs, those movements that were so prominent back in the day need to come back. You know, they need to bring those back to the forefront of some of the, I guess, community involvement, labor involvement, just progression, you know. Most folks probably don't remember affirmative action, especially younger generations. Some of these new folks in the politics, they're far removed from that. But affirmative action was one of those civil rights products that made things happen in overt and covert ways, you know. So could you elaborate on that if you can, and see how you can work that into your campaign? Thank you.
Thank you for your call, brother.
So if I heard the question correctly, it was basically my general feelings on affirmative action. I want to take it back a step further. See, my administration is going to be committed to equity. Equity doesn't mean you treat everybody equal. Equity means you invest the most in those who need the most. We do the exact opposite in this city. We invest the most in those who need the least, and we invest the least in those who need the most. That's part one. Part two is that oftentimes programs like affirmative action are framed as if there's some sort of compensation for past wrongs. We have to bring into the public consciousness the current brutalities that are inflicted upon people of color and particularly black people, and frame our interventions and programmatic ways to deal with those brutalities as trying to deal with current, not just past, but current brutalities. So example, 300, let's talk about something, I'm not even going to get into the police piece. Let's talk about something real simple. 397 bicycling tickets were issued in Austin. Now, I don't even know how they found 397 people riding bikes in Austin. You rarely see it. But 397 bicycling tickets were issued in Austin. Lincoln Park, where you see bicycling all the time. You know how many bicycling tickets were written there? 5. 5 to 397. And I've ridden my bike in Lincoln Park. I know they ride through red lights as much as anybody, or maybe even more than anybody. But we have a system that has decided to oppress and exploit black communities by targeting them for enforcement and extraction of revenue through this bicycling tickets. And that's just one of them. We haven't even gotten the red light cameras. We haven't gotten the duplicate tickets that they've targeted against African American people. And so there is active targeting of black communities now by our government, because that's what the police are. Policing is an extension of government, and if you have a corrupt and racist government, then that corrupt and racist government are going to use the police force in a corrupt and racist manner to continue the oppression and exploitation of the communities that they've targeted, particularly people of color and especially black people. That's the public sector. Look in the private sector. If you are a black family, they found that if you were a black family making $200,000 per year, you were more likely to be targeted for a subprime loan than a white family making $30,000. Picture that. That's today, right? That's during the height of the housing bubble that crashed our economy. Those negative, toxic lending practices were targeted toward black people. So we have to make sure we call out that economic brutality and that exploitation that's happening now, so that we frame interventions as not for some past wrongs, but wrongs that are impacting us and are being committed against people of color, and particularly black people right now.
Well said, Troy. Now, before we leave, because we only have a couple minutes left, we have one more topic to discuss, and that's the Magna hat. Make America Great Again. Now, Make America Great Again can be interpreted to many different ways. It can be, let's try to change this hat. One thing Kanye West said, that he puts it on his head and said that's his superpowers. What do you think about that, Troy?
I have to be honest with you, man. I've heard about the Kanye thing only tangentially. Some of the statements he's made. I have not looked into them with any great depth. They are certainly concerning. Frankly, I had an interesting experience with another black pro-Trump person. Her name's Stephanie Trussell. She hosts a radio program. She's very popular. I think it's on WLS, maybe GN, but I think it's WLS. She hosts a radio program, and the first time she reached out to me was about 1.5 years ago. Maybe 2 years, and I decided I wasn't even going to respond, because I looked at a lot of the negative stuff that I saw on the website, and a lot of just this right-wing language, and I thought, that's the first time I ever refused to go on the show.
Wow.
2 years later, they reached out again, and by this time I'm running for mayor. She reached out before when I was the principal's president, which I still am, and 2 years later they reached out again, and my campaign manager advises me to go. I said, all right, I'll go. And I get there, and she was the nicest, most humblest person. She was she was one of the nicest, most humblest people you'll ever meet in person before she gets on that air. And, treated me with a great deal of respect, both on the show and behind the scenes. Just had a lot of opinions that I profoundly disagree with.
Understood.
That... you paint a lot of these right-wing Trump supporters, they believe in, they truly believe in much of the things that they're saying, that they're wrong. But I found that I was able to actually have a conversation with her. And I would imagine if I could have a conversation with Kanye, it might go equally well, and I could find out what's happening behind all of this. Absolutely. And maybe even able to influence him in one way or another. Who knows? Kanye's my brother, just like any other human being on this planet. And I would certainly be willing to engage in conversation with him and try to treat him like a human being and not, dismiss him completely, because you never know what's actually behind what a person is talking about. But I can certainly say that I disagree with just about everything I've heard from him so far in relationship to Donald Trump.
Well, understood, Troy. It was really good talking to you today. Is there any information you want to leave the guests and the viewers? They can reach out to you?
Sure. My website is troyforchicago.com. That's troyforchicago.com. The email is info@troyforchicago.com. We are gathering signatures to ensure my name gets on the ballot, because when my name gets on the ballot, that means that anti-corruption agenda gets on the ballot. It means that anti-racism, desegregation agenda gets on the ballot. It means an agenda where you're actually looking at root causes of the problems in our city gets on the ballot. If my name's not on the ballot, then those things don't get discussed and they don't get into the mayor's office. So I hope you go to TroyForChicago.com, sign up, volunteer, or contribute. Thank you.
Well, Troy, it was really good talking to you today, brother. I really appreciate you. I'm definitely going to try to have some information on Troy on the McGrawFoundation.com website. Until then, you ladies and gentlemen, you have a nice night, all right? Thank you.